In the quiet moments of life, when the noise of obligations and comparisons finally fades, many discover a subtle emptiness that refuses to be ignored. It is not the absence of material goods or social approval that aches the most, but the silent perception of being disconnected from a deeper essence. At this threshold, the longing for prosperity often emerges not merely as a desire for financial abundance, but as a yearning to live in coherence with one's true self. This video begins here, in this vulnerable space where the heart whispers that something greater awaits. If only we could align with it. Every person who has stood on the edge of change knows the paradox, wanting transformation, but feeling tethered by invisible threads of fear, doubt, and self-sabotage. This invisible tension is the true subject of our journey. Before prosperity can manifest in the tangible world, it first ripens in the inner realm, where thoughts, emotions, and actions intertwine. Neuroscience has shown us, through voices like Dr. Joe Dispenza, that coherence between the brain and the heart creates a measurable electromagnetic field, a harmony that shifts perception and magnetizes opportunities. Yet science alone cannot hold the entire truth, because prosperity is not only biology or frequency, it is also faith, imagination, and the courage to act when the moment demands. The story of abundance is not about rushing to the finish line or accumulating wealth as proof of worth. It is about recognizing the code hidden within ordinary days, the way we breathe before making a decision, the emotions we carry when signing our name, the quiet dialogue we hold with ourselves in times of risk. Prosperity appears not when we force the future, but when we surrender into alignment, trusting that life is conspiring on our behalf. Bruce Lipton reminds us, through his work on epigenetics, that the environment inside us, the beliefs, the emotions, the subtle energy we cultivate, activates or silences potentials that directly shape our external outcomes. This introduction is not an invitation to dream idly, but to awaken deliberately. It asks you to journey beyond the superficial promises of instant wealth and discover the inner mechanics that precede any leap forward. Here, prosperity becomes less about luck and more about signature, your unique alignment between mind, heart, and action. If you stay with me, you will not only learn concepts but also practices, images, and truths you can embody each day, transforming prosperity from a fleeting wish into a living reality. This is the code, subtle and hidden, yet accessible to all who are willing to listen and align. There is a particular tension that many people live with but rarely name. It is the distance between what they say they want and what they consistently embody in their inner state. One can declare with conviction the dream of prosperity, affirm mantras of abundance, and yet spend most of the day carrying the emotional frequency of scarcity. This hidden gap is what silently shapes decisions, behaviors, and the very lens through which life is interpreted. It explains why some remain stuck at the threshold of breakthrough, circling familiar frustrations despite immense effort. When the nervous system is wired for survival, the heart beats not with the rhythm of expansion, but with contraction. In this state, every opportunity feels like a risk too great, every delay a threat, and every silence a rejection. Neuroscience reminds us that the brain, conditioned by fear, prioritizes safety over growth, even when growth is precisely what we are longing for. This incongruence creates a paradox, reaching for prosperity while holding the vibration of scarcity. It is like tuning a radio to one station and expecting to hear another. The signal never aligns, and frustration becomes inevitable. What is often misunderstood is that more planning, more strategy, or even more discipline cannot solve this misalignment. One may work harder, attend endless seminars, or adopt dozens of financial tactics, but if the inner emotional signature does not shift, the outer results will eventually collapse. True prosperity requires coherence. It begins not with effort alone, but with the integration of intention, emotion, and embodied action. Joe Dispenza describes this as coherence between the heart and the brain, a state measurable by instruments, but felt most clearly as inner harmony, where desire no longer fights against fear. Consider how this manifests in everyday life. A person may decide to launch a new project, full of passion and clarity, but as soon as a challenge arises, self-doubt whispers, "You are not ready. You will fail again." That whisper, charged with emotion, carries more weight than the conscious plan. The result is hesitation, procrastination, or an unconscious sabotage of opportunity. The true barrier was never a lack of intelligence or resources, but the invisible resonance of the inner state. Prosperity, then, is less about external permission and more about internal congruence. A powerful metaphor can help anchor this truth. Imagine drawing a bow. The string must hold the right tension. If pulled too tight with anxiety, the arrow veers off wildly. If held too loose with apathy, the arrow falls short. Only coherence, a balanced tension, ensures direction and power. So too with prosperity. The mind must hold intention clearly, the heart must sustain a rhythm of calm sufficiency, and the body must take consistent action. When any of these are out of balance, the trajectory falters, and the result is disappointment. This is where awareness becomes crucial. The emotions you carry before making financial decisions matter just as much as the decision itself. If each choice is colored by urgency, shame, or unworthiness, then even wise strategies will be undermined. To bring this into practice, one can begin mapping emotional signatures throughout daily choices. Before, during, and after each financial action, pause and name the emotion present. Is it anxiety, relief, gratitude? Over time, a pattern reveals itself. You begin to see that the results in your life mirror not only your actions, but also the emotional climate in which those actions were born. Such awareness invites responsibility without blame. It is not about condemning yourself for carrying fear, but about recognizing that fear cannot be the soil in which prosperity grows. The invitation is to cultivate coherence intentionally. Small practices help. A few minutes of slow, steady breathing before a decision. A pause to recall a moment of genuine gratitude before signing an agreement. A conscious reframing of risk as an arena of growth rather than a battlefield of potential failure. These practices are subtle, but over time, they rewire the nervous system, creating a stable foundation for prosperity to rest upon. It is important to dismantle myths along the way. Visualization alone is not enough. One can imagine wealth endlessly, but if the body continues to signal stress, the visualization remains an image disconnected from experience. True manifestation occurs when image and physiology converge, when the body believes what the mind is envisioning. Without this convergence, the mind may dream, but the body remains in exile, anchored in the familiar chemistry of survival. The dream then dissolves, and the cycle of frustration repeats. This hidden distance between desire and vibration is why so many fail just before the leap forward. They attempt to change behavior without shifting identity, strategy without state, and the result is temporary at best. To cross this gap requires an honest encounter with oneself. It requires naming the emotions that have become habitual companions and gently, persistently choosing a new coherence. This is not an instant process, nor does it promise perfection. Rather, it is the gradual building of a new inner rhythm, one that can sustain the weight of prosperity when it arrives. In the end, prosperity is not a prize granted to the lucky or the chosen. It is a natural consequence of inner alignment. When what you desire resonates with what you embody, opportunities no longer feel like struggles against fate, but as natural unfoldings of your path. The code is simple, yet demanding: coherence. It is in the space where your thoughts, emotions, and actions no longer contradict each other that the leap into abundance becomes possible. This is the hidden distance we must learn to bridge, for within it lies the threshold of transformation. There comes a moment in every journey of transformation when one realizes that prosperity is not blocked by lack of intelligence, talent, or even opportunity, but by the inability to regulate one's own inner atmosphere. Many live with an inner climate of survival, alert, restless, and braced against the unknown, while trying to build a future that requires openness and trust. This tension cannot be resolved by forcing outcomes, because survival and creation are incompatible states. To reprogram the inner state is to learn the subtle art of stepping out of constant defense and into the field of possibility, where prosperity can be received without resistance. Living in survival mode has consequences that are easy to overlook because they feel normal. The constant checking of bank accounts, the rush of adrenaline at every delay, the anxiety before commitments, these are signs of a nervous system locked in defense. In such a state, decisions are narrowed, vision is shortened, and the imagination cannot extend beyond immediate safety. Prosperity, however, requires a different rhythm. It asks us to sustain presence long enough to see beyond temporary fears, to nurture a vibration of sufficiency that makes room for opportunities to land and expand. The body does not easily release survival patterns because it has learned to equate them with safety. This is why many people find themselves repeating the same financial cycles even after gaining new knowledge. Homeostasis, the tendency to return to the familiar, pulls them back into stress responses, even when those responses no longer serve their future. Recognizing this dynamic is essential because it shifts the focus from endlessly searching for new external strategies to cultivating the internal capacity to stay regulated in the face of uncertainty. Reprogramming the state begins with the body, not the intellect. One does not need to believe in abundance immediately. One can practice it physically until the body becomes familiar with it. Adjusting posture, breathing slowly and rhythmically, softening the tone of one's voice. These are not trivial gestures. They are signals to the nervous system that it is safe to relax, and in that relaxation, the imagination opens. When the body begins to embody creation rather than defense, the mind follows, and belief emerges from experience rather than effort. Consider the image of a tuning fork. When it vibrates with clarity, everything around it begins to resonate with the same note. A person who sustains the state of sufficiency becomes like that tuning fork. Their presence shifts the energy of conversations, negotiations, and even opportunities. Others sense it not as bravado or excitement, but as coherence, a grounded steadiness that inspires trust. This resonance is often what determines whether an idea is received, a partnership is formed, or a project is funded. Prosperity follows the tone we carry. It is tempting to confuse excitement with coherence, but the two are very different. Excitement is a spike, an eruption of energy that quickly fades and often leaves exhaustion behind. Coherence, on the other hand, is stable, measured, and enduring. It allows one to engage in challenges without being consumed by them, to make decisions from clarity rather than impulse. Many fall into the trap of mistaking excitement for alignment, only to find themselves burned out when the high collapses. Prosperity requires steadiness, not intensity. The practice of reprogramming the inner state is therefore both simple and profound. Begin with small acts. Before making a financial choice, take a few minutes to breathe deeply and evenly, letting the heart and the brain settle into rhythm. Create an internal ritual of grounding before stepping into important conversations, allowing the body to remember sufficiency rather than scarcity. These simple practices slowly accumulate, training the nervous system to remain open rather than defensive. Over time, decisions become clearer, actions more consistent, and opportunities more visible. The true test of transformation is not whether one feels peaceful in meditation, but whether one can sustain coherence in moments of challenge. This is why it is essential to measure progress not only by external outcomes, but by the stability of inner state. Did I remain calm when faced with delay? Did I respond from clarity rather than fear? These are the questions that reveal whether the inner programming is shifting. When the answer becomes yes more often than no, the outer results begin to reflect the change with surprising speed. What often derails this process is impatience. The mind demands immediate evidence, forgetting that the body learns slowly through repetition and consistency. Prosperity is not a sudden windfall bestowed by chance, but the inevitable result of an inner state that no longer contradicts itself. The seed planted today may not sprout tomorrow, but if the soil is tended with patience and presence, growth is certain. This is the paradox. Slowing down the urgency of proof is what accelerates the unfolding of results. Reprogramming the inner state is not an escape from reality, but a return to the true foundation of prosperity. When the nervous system is calm, the mind sees clearly, and the heart stays open. In this alignment, decisions are wiser, actions more deliberate, and life responds with coherence. The leap into abundance no longer feels forced, but natural, the next step in a journey already unfolding. To live in this state is to carry within you the conditions of prosperity, wherever you go, regardless of circumstance. This is the inner architecture of creation, the invisible pattern that precedes every tangible leap forward. There is a hidden impatience that quietly sabotages many journeys toward abundance. Beneath the strategies and affirmations, there often lingers a restless need to see immediate proof, a need that disrupts the natural rhythm of unfolding. Time becomes an adversary rather than an ally, and in this adversarial stance, seeds are uprooted before they can grow roots. To truly prosper is to reconcile with time, to understand that the laws of growth are not against us but for us, if we learn to wait with presence rather than with tension. The human nervous system struggles with delay because it has been trained to associate waiting with danger. In survival, a delay means risk. A predator might be closer, a resource might not arrive, a chance might be lost. This wiring makes it difficult to trust in unseen processes. Yet prosperity follows a rhythm more like nature than like urgency. Consider the bamboo, which spends years cultivating roots invisible to the eye before shooting upward in a sudden surge of growth. Without patience during the invisible phase, the miraculous acceleration would never come. Science offers its own reflection of this truth. Behavioral psychology has long observed that actions often show results with a lag, a phenomenon akin to hysteresis. There is a delay between cause and visible effect. This means that the choices we make today may not bear fruit until weeks or months later, and abandoning them prematurely prevents us from ever reaching the inflection point where results multiply. Prosperity demands a willingness to endure the plateau, the period where effort is steady but outcomes remain quiet. The plateau is not failure, it is gestation. In modern life, where everything seems to accelerate, this principle feels counterintuitive. We are conditioned to believe that speed equals success, that if results do not appear quickly, something is wrong. Yet the paradox is that slowing down, focusing on fewer strategies, and committing to them consistently is often what accelerates long-term growth. Spreading energy too thin, chasing every new method or abandoning one path for another, creates perpetual beginnings without ever reaching the fullness of harvest. To live in harmony with time is to embrace the process rather than obsess over outcomes. This does not mean passivity or resignation. It means committing to practices with consistency, measuring progress not only by external metrics, but also by inner stability. Did the decision align with my coherent state? Did the action reflect my deeper intention? When these answers are yes, the results, though delayed, are inevitable. The universe responds to consistency with trust, and trust is repaid with opportunity. Impatience often hides fear. Fear of not being worthy, fear of being forgotten, fear that the universe will not answer. This fear is understandable, yet it must be named. Otherwise, it hijacks decisions, leading to constant changes of direction. One week a project is pursued with passion, the next it is abandoned for another, and the cycle repeats endlessly. What is required is faith in the process, the quiet strength to persist through silence, and the humility to let results arrive in their own timing. A useful practice here is to frame growth in windows of time. Rather than judging after a few days, commit to a practice or strategy for a fixed period, 3 weeks, a month, or longer, before making adjustments. This stabilizes the nervous system, allowing patience to be embodied rather than merely thought. Within such windows, focus on process metrics rather than outcomes, the number of conversations held, the consistency of rituals practiced, the steadiness of emotional state. Over time, these measures reveal progress more truthfully than immediate financial numbers. Prosperity also requires discernment about when to act and when to pause. There are seasons for planting and seasons for harvest, and confusing the two leads to frustration. Learning to sense the rhythm, when an idea is still rooting, when it is time to push forward, and when it is time to wait, becomes part of the art of prosperity. This discernment grows sharper as one practices coherence, because a regulated nervous system can sense subtle shifts that stress and urgency conceal. The reconciliation with time ultimately brings freedom. No longer enslaved by the demand for instant evidence, one can rest in the assurance that unseen processes are at work. This rest does not mean inactivity, it means confidence. Actions become lighter, more deliberate, and infused with presence rather than anxiety. Prosperity then feels less like chasing a moving target and more like aligning with a rhythm already set in motion, a rhythm that will, at the right time, manifest visible abundance. The path of abundance is not a sprint, but a cultivation. It honors cycles, delays, and gestations, recognizing them as necessary parts of growth. By embracing the plateau, by persisting through silence, and by cultivating trust in timing, one steps into harmony with the deeper intelligence of life. The leap forward is not forced but allowed, not manufactured but ripened. To live this way is to understand that time, far from being an enemy, is the hidden partner of prosperity. There is a crucial stage in the path of prosperity, when inner coherence, patience, and clarity must take form in action. Without action, even the most elevated states of consciousness remain unexpressed potential. Yet the challenge is not simply to act, but to act in a way that is aligned, measured, and sustainable. Many people exhaust themselves by taking scattered actions, fueled by bursts of anxiety or excitement, only to discover that results do not match effort. What is required is a different architecture, a way of structuring decisions and behaviors so that they reflect inner alignment and give shape to abundance without collapsing under the weight of fear or impulse. Aligned action begins with clarity of intention. Prosperity is not created by endless activity, but by purposeful steps rooted in coherence. When the nervous system is regulated and the heart and mind are aligned, action emerges less as a frantic reaction and more as a deliberate unfolding. In this state, one is able to discern which opportunities resonate and which are distractions. The power of this discernment cannot be overstated because it transforms decision-making from a gamble into a process of resonance, where choices reflect identity rather than insecurity. One of the most misunderstood aspects of prosperity is risk. Risk is often seen as an enemy, something to be avoided or feared. Yet risk is simply the meeting point between vision and reality, the narrow bridge one must cross to allow possibility to become tangible. The difference between destructive risk and transformative risk lies in regulation. When action is taken in a state of coherence, risk becomes measured, boundaries are respected, and clarity guides the process. When action is taken from excitement or desperation, risk becomes chaos, and the consequences drain energy rather than build it. Consider the image of a suspension bridge. To walk across requires focus on the fixed point ahead, rather than on the drop below. In the same way, aligned action requires the gaze to remain steady on intention and criteria, not on the fears or fantasies that clamor for attention. Each step is deliberate, each movement informed by both inner coherence and practical wisdom. This way of walking transforms risk into a teacher, guiding the individual into greater trust and resilience. The architecture of action also calls for simplicity. Many imagine that prosperity requires doing more projects, more channels, more attempts. But excess creates confusion and dilutes energy. True alignment often requires pruning, refining the message, and focusing on the few actions that carry the greatest resonance. When energy is concentrated, feedback becomes clearer, and results can be measured with precision. This is how sustainable growth is created, not through expansion in every direction, but through depth in the directions that matter. There is also the delicate art of iteration. No action is perfect on the first attempt, and aligned action does not mean rigid action. It means creating a clear structure, testing it, and refining based on feedback. Rejection is not a verdict against worth, but information that guides adjustment. Each step, whether successful or not, contributes to the architecture of prosperity, as long as it is integrated with awareness. In this way, even setbacks become building blocks rather than obstacles. The inner state again becomes central. If actions are taken from a place of coherence, then outcomes, whether favorable or challenging, do not destabilize identity. One remains steady, using data instead of drama to refine the path forward. This steadiness is what transforms small, consistent actions into exponential growth. Prosperity ceases to feel like chasing fortune and begins to feel like walking a well-laid path, guided by both inner alignment and external clarity. Metrics serve an important role here, but they must be chosen wisely. It is easy to be seduced by vanity metrics, numbers that look impressive but reveal little about true alignment. The more powerful approach is to measure fluency, the quality of conversations, the clarity of responses, the percentage of actions taken in a coherent state. These subtle metrics reveal whether prosperity is being built on solid ground or shaky foundations. When such measures remain stable, financial outcomes inevitably follow. What emerges through this process is confidence, not the fragile confidence that depends on immediate success, but the deep confidence that comes from knowing one has built a foundation aligned with inner truth. Each action, no matter how small, becomes an affirmation of coherence. Each decision reflects trust in both oneself and the larger intelligence of life. Prosperity then ceases to be a distant prize and becomes the natural consequence of living in alignment. The architecture of aligned action, therefore, is not about complexity, but about resonance. It is about choosing simplicity over confusion, coherence over excitement, patience over urgency. It is about walking steadily across the suspension bridge of risk, keeping the gaze fixed on intention, and allowing each step to be informed by both heart and mind. In this way, prosperity is built not as a fragile structure vulnerable to collapse, but as a living, breathing reality that endures and expands with grace. Prosperity, as we have discovered together, is not a matter of luck or a sudden stroke of fortune. It is the natural echo of a life lived in coherence, where intention, emotion, and action harmonize into a single signature of being. The journey we have walked throughout this video has revealed that abundance begins long before numbers appear on a bank statement or opportunities materialize on the horizon. It begins in the invisible landscape of the self, where the nervous system, the heart, and the mind align in rhythm with the flow of life. We have seen that the hidden distance between desire and vibration must be bridged if transformation is to occur. Desire without coherence creates only frustration. But when the inner state is reprogrammed and cultivated with presence, possibilities expand effortlessly. We have recognized the sacred partnership with time, the necessity of patience, and the power of sustaining momentum during the plateau, where growth is not yet visible, but silently forming roots. And we have explored the architecture of aligned action, where choices are no longer random or desperate, but deliberate, simplified, and anchored in resonance. Each of these steps reflects a code, a living sequence that precedes every leap into prosperity. It is not a mystical secret reserved for the few, but a universal pattern accessible to all who are willing to cultivate coherence within. Prosperity flows not as a distant prize, but as the inevitable result of living aligned with one's truest essence. In this state, opportunities cease to feel like battles to be won and begin to feel like invitations already written into the rhythm of existence. The call now is to embody what has been learned. Prosperity asks to be lived, not only imagined. It invites you to walk each day with coherence, patience, and clarity until the leap forward ceases to feel extraordinary and becomes your natural way of being. This is the code hidden beneath appearances, the secret that reveals itself not in promises, but in lived alignment. Prosperity is not waiting to arrive, it is waiting to be expressed through you. Before you leave, ask yourself this: if prosperity is not a destination but a state of coherence, what part of your inner life is ready to be aligned today? This question is not rhetorical. It is an invitation for you to pause and reflect, to name that part of your being that has long been waiting for attention and harmony. If this journey resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a step on this path of transformation. By subscribing, you are not only supporting this work, but also joining a community that believes in the power of inner alignment to create outer change. And as you continue, do not stop here. On your screen, you will find the next video waiting, ready to deepen your understanding and guide you further into the practice of prosperity. Click and keep walking with us. Transformation is not a single moment. It is a living rhythm, and the next chapter is already unfolding for you.